Welcome to Unique Mobility. I'm Jimmy, and this is my 1982 Electrek. Now this is Electrek, T-R-E-K, because this is made by a company called Unique Mobility almost 40 years ago. This car was made here in Englewood, Colorado, only about 1 or 2 miles from this exact location. Now this is in the classic brown on brown styling with the cool vinyl graphics on the side. It's in kind of rough shape now, but it's almost 100% here and almost 100% original. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Jimmy, and this is my new adventure. So join me on this new phase of exploring vintage electric vehicles and trying to get them on the road and running. Okay, so what do I need to do? I have a 3-phase plan of attack. Number 1, I need to get this car moving under its own power. I need to assemble a testing battery pack. I need to reassemble the original controller. I need to power it all up with the watching oversight from Jim McCullough, who was one of the original engineers for this company and still has tons of first-hand knowledge of how to get these cars working. I'm so lucky to have his help. Once I confirm that the controller works, the motor works, all the wiring and stuff is okay, then I need to get it roadworthy. So I'll need to go around, do all the wheel bearings, brakes, brake fluids, suspension, make sure that's all good. Needs a new windshield. The lights need to be done. It needs to, lots of stuff like that, getting it roadworthy. The third part, lithium batteries. We're gonna put lithium ion batteries in this puppy. It's gonna be awesome. The original battery pack for this car was 1,000 pounds. It was lead acid, 16 lead acid 6-volt batteries for a total of about 100 volts, 96 volts. So what I'm gonna do is replicate that, but with a lithium pack that will be just a couple 100 pounds. And I'm hoping we'll get 200 miles of range, better performance than stock, lighter weight than stock, faster charging. I even want to put a J1772 plug on it so I can use public plug-in charging stations and install like a faster charging system at my home. Because originally this car only has a 110 outlet plug-in. So charging the lead acid batteries, that was fine, but it's not gonna cut it from my big boy lithium pack. So that's my 3-phase plan of attack. Get it moving, get it roadworthy, LiPo batteries. All right, let's check out the car. Now, not too many people know about these cars, so let me tell you a little bit about them. Between 60 and 80 of these were made, depending on who you ask. They're made here in Englewood, Colorado. Now, it's a full fiberglass body with some steel subframe components. The suspension, the steering rack, the brakes, most of the running gear like that is pulled from a VW Rabbit. So I can still get spares for that. It's still very usable and it should handle well. I haven't driven it yet, but I'm hoping that it'll handle well. So it had the springs and shocks and also the transmission from the Volkswagen Rabbit diesel. And they chose the diesel because it was rated for the heavier engine, so the springs were a little bit stronger. And also the transmission had a taller final drive ratio for the taller gear to better utilize the torque of the electric motor. Now this has a General Electric 30 horsepower electric motor. Now what's interesting about this motor is it does not have permanent magnets. It has what's called a separately excited field. And what that means is that the controller sends power to the armature, but it also sends power to the outside coil of the motor, which energizes the field around the armature. And then as the RPMs increase, as I understand it, that field reduces in strength for higher RPM use. And what that does is it broadens the torque curve for more drivability on the streets. So this is a really cutting edge car. This was the first electric production vehicle to have regenerative braking. Hey buddy. Now, because most of the running gear for this car is from a Volkswagen Rabbit, I'm really excited because I'll be able to get replacements for those parts, even upgraded parts like brakes or suspension components. things like that, so I can really get this car running and driving like a brand new vehicle. Now, this is my first fiberglass car, and also this is my first American-made vehicle, so I'm really excited to dive into this car. I get to use my standard tools for once, but this is just a really cool piece of history, and I'm excited to dive into it. Let me show you a little bit closer look at what we're dealing with here. So like I said, most of the running gear for this car comes from the Volkswagen Rabbit. So the tires on this car are 155 13s. We'll go inside. I've currently got the seats removed. The dash has interesting warning lights. Has about 20,000 miles. Here you can see the DC amps and volts. The battery gauge. More warning lights. This ignition, the steering column, and the pedals are all from the Volkswagen Rabbit. 12-volt power outlet right here. This car does have a heater. It does not have air conditioning. It's kind of a spacey car. Now this is a hatchback. They also made 2+2s, but this car also has seats in the back. Has an interesting little interior light there, and it has a set of speakers in the back. Now you probably noticed this car has a 4-speed transmission, which is odd for an electric vehicle because usually an electric vehicle has no speed transmission. But nope, this actually has a 4-speed Volkswagen Rabbit. It's a little stiff and doesn't want to go into the gears. It needs some love, but it is a standard Volkswagen transmission. And the reason is because this motor only revs to 5,000 RPM. This electric motor only goes to 5,000 RPM. So also having such low power, low torque, it needs the gears if you're going to get up to 70 miles an hour, which is the claimed top speed. So it's an interesting window. So you have this twist knob, and what that does is it pulls out a rod that presses against the window, and then you have this knob and you tug on it. It's a little stiff, but it swings back like that. This car also has a sunroof. We'll get that working and lubricated and all watertight. Has a nice shag carpet. And I just love the graphics, the electric graphics on the side. And the swoosh. Whoosh. Very cool. All right, moving around to the front. So I've got it kind of taken apart now as we're getting ready to apply power to it for the first time in my ownership. You can see down there, that's the main high voltage battery connector, and there's a hole in the firewall right there where that passes through, and the entire tunnel of the car, as you saw inside, that's where the battery goes, is in that huge tunnel. So this is the little cooling fan to keep the motor cool. It blows in there. So this is that General Electric motor. You can see the high voltage connections for the battery, or to the controller. You can see this is the transmission from the Volkswagen Rabbit, Rabbit diesel. There's the manual transmission linkage and just normal CV axles. Okay, now here is the battery charger. So this is the 110 AC volt charger that would charge up the main battery pack on board the car. I have it kind of pulled up here so you can see it, and so I can access some things behind it. But it's kind of a big thing. It's got one of these fancy heat sinks on it. So these are the relays for things like the windshield wipers, the windshield washer fluid, and the heater. You can see here this is a reservoir for like water or coolant of some sort, and there's actually a heater core up underneath the dash. Down here you can see there's an electric pump, and there's also this heating element that was also mounted under the dash, or underneath the engine bay. And this is just a heating element that applies DC voltage directly to an element in here and just heats up the water, and then it gets pumped through the valves and the pump through the heater core to heat up the cabin. I'll show you underneath the dash. This is that heater core I was talking about. It's like a water to air radiator basically. You can see it looks like it blows across there, into the cabin. Then there's these two vents near the floor on each side. So my guess is that it blows up onto the windshield and then it blows down out of here for your feet heat. Who knows how effective it is, but it is actually like a water to air heat exchanger radiator, which is pretty cool. So we'll see if maybe we can use some kind of modern heater with that. So up here is the fuse box, and it also contains some relays. This is the main switching relay for the main DC power. These are the main DC power connections you can see here. This is a fuse for the main DC connection that would blow if it overamped or for whatever reason. And then on top of here would go a lid to seal it. Okay, this right here is the DC to DC converter. Now these are used on electric vehicles to convert the high voltage from the main battery pack down to a standard 12 volt to run all of the accessories like your headlights, tail lights, horn, radio, heater, windshield wipers, and all that. This converts it to 13.7, which is the nominal voltage for your standard 12 volt car battery. And there would be like a small lead acid motorcycle battery, which would run the headlights and the tail lights and all that stuff. So I've got an AGM replacement battery on the way for that. And this box here is what's used to keep that charged. Now as we come to the back of the vehicle, you can see it has these great Buick Skylark taillights. And we'll look inside. So this is the battery tunnel. Now this is 8 feet deep. And imagine if you filled that entire tunnel with lithium batteries. This car could drive around the world. Well, not quite. But you can see it's a really modular construction. There's a door that goes on the end here, and then there's another door that goes on the back of here, like it's kind of like a tailgate. There's a space saver spare tire that fits in here. There's a bottle, which I'm sure doesn't work, of compressed air. These are hand twist knobs, and the bumper. We'll look underneath the car here. You can see it's just a Volkswagen Rabbit rear twist beam, I guess, suspension. Definitely seen better days, but we can get all new parts. So one interesting thing that is a modification to this Electrek that others do not have, you see this tube coming up from the front, and there's two wires that come back here, and these go from the plug at the front into this. This is a General Electric meter. The previous owner modified this car so that when you plug in at the front, the power comes into this meter, gets metered, and then goes into the charger and charges the battery. The reason he did that was so that the city of Longmont, Colorado could come and read the meter when he was parked out front of his business, and they could charge him for the electricity that he used every month. Definitely going to keep this in the car because it's so quirky. But you can see the latch. This would be like kind of a deeper trunk. Huge amount of storage in this car, which is one of the reasons I'm excited for it, because I love hatchbacks, the utility and versatility of hatchbacks. One cool thing about this car is the body is all fiberglass, but what it has on the underside here in the wheel wells and also underneath the chassis is some really tough polycarbonate plastic that's been bonded to the fiberglass, and this protects it from rock chips and any damage and debris it might get. All right, so this is the battery tray that goes inside the back of the car. Now this is just like the car. It's also made of fiberglass with the tough plastic bonded on top. You can see this is the high voltage connector that would go through the firewall, and then each of these trays originally would have 4 6-volt batteries. Zorro, out! So with 4 batteries in each tray, that would be a total of 16 batteries, and each one of these compartments would hold about 250 pounds of batteries. So with the whole thing up, you'd have almost 1,000 pounds. And because this whole assembly was so heavy and it's so thin in between, what they did is with the cars, they sold a large rack. You would winch using the cable the entire battery pack out of the back of the vehicle onto the tray, service the batteries, whatever you need to do, and then push the battery back into the car. Okay, now this is the combined accelerator and regen brake controller. This is basically the box that controls the throttle for the car. So even though it's an electric vehicle, it's not drive-by-wire. It actually has a throttle cable just like a normal car. And that cable pulls on this lever here, and then this plugs into the motor controller. But if I take off the lid here, you can see there's 2 potentiometers inside. And when I turn the throttle, you can see them rotating in unison. And there's a complex spring there, mechanism, clock spring, that's really cool. Now the reason there's 2 of them is because one of them controls the throttle and the other one controls the regen, so that both of those circuits have a signal for the throttle position. So it was very important when they manufactured these cars that they synced up these 2 potentiometers so that they were identical in their sweep, and that way the regen and the throttle weren't trying to fight against each other and they were working in unison. One quirky thing about this car I noticed is this mirror was added, just glued on there. It's just a normal bathroom mirror of some type, and the reason is to reflect the readout from the charger, which was in front and facing away from you when you look inside underneath the hood, so you could just read it really easy with that mirror. Alright, this is the main motor controller for the Electrek, and it's huge. It's approximately 2 feet long by 1 feet wide. Here you can read the placard, and all the wires are labeled. This is just a normal valve stem like on your tire to test with air pressure to just maximum 1 psi and test the controller box for leaks and make sure it's watertight. Let's take a closer look inside. So this is the main motor controller. It's got tons going on in here. This is before anything digital, so this is all analog components. There's 3 rails here, from what I understand, is these control main power, negative, and then regen. Because remember, this is the first production car to ever have regen. Now down here you can see the rectifying diodes. Now that former engineer who's been helping me told me that these are common failures in this controller, so I've gone ahead and already replaced all 7 of those. And I went ahead and used some high quality thermal paste in between the diodes and the heatsink mount here. You can see this whole controller is mounted to the heatsink, and back in 1982 this heatsink must have been insanely expensive. This whole case is aluminum and would help to dissipate all of the heat. And this is where the controller mounts, in the very front of the car, behind the bumper. And that way it would get a lot of airflow right up and across that huge heatsink, just like the radiator in a normal car. Surprise! We have 2 of these cars here at Unique Mobility. Surprise! Again, we have 3 of these cars at Unique Mobility. This one and the white one are both 1979 cars. The white one is a runner. It's already been converted to lithium batteries and it runs and drives. It needs a lot of TLC and a lot of help. The yellow car needs even more TLC and even more help. This was one of the very early production Electreks, and it's missing a lot of the components like that 12-volt converter and some of the other components that the brown car has, like a heater. This car actually had a Gillette hair dryer underneath the dash for the defroster. But this is an Electrek, and this is one of the very first ones. So we will also be checking out this car and restoring it back to its former glory. All right, in the white one, like I said, this one runs and drives. This is owned by my buddy, and he's going to be doing some modifications to it and getting it back to its former glory as well. And we'll be following the journey of this car here also. Alright, thank you for watching. This is the first episode of what I hope to be be a long series, getting the Electrek back on the road and having a lot of fun with it, seeing how far we can drive it, seeing how fast we can go with it, seeing all the places it can take us and all the people that we can fit in it, and all stuff like that. So I hope that you enjoyed everything so far, and why don't you go ahead and subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and that'll give me a little bit of encouragement to get rolling and get this car going.